Hello, my name is Will Kingswood, and welcome back to the 15th F1 special on Raw Sport Weekly. Looking at the British Grand Prix, a race that nothing really happened. I can't even lie. It was arguably the most intense race of the season, with Hamilton and Verstappen colliding on first lap, going into Copse Corner. Obviously, we also had sprint qualifying, so we'll talk about that and looking at Hamilton's coming through the field, whether his penalty was justified, and what will happen for the remainder of the season. But I can't do it on my own. So once again, I've got a guest with me, making his way back onto the podcast. It's Jack Rowe. How are you doing, Jack?
Oh yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. Kind of excited to get into it and jog my memory as well. It's been a couple of weeks now. It feels like a very long time ago with all the Mercedes Red Bull chat we've had going on in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean it's been a dramatic one. So what we'll do quickly is we will run through the finishing positions. So Hamilton in first, Leclerc second, Bottas running out the podium in third, Norris and Ricciardo 4 and 5 for McLaren, Sainz sixth for Ferrari, Alonso seventh, Stroll eighth, Ocon ninth, and Tsunoda rounding out the top 10. So what I think we'll do first is start off as the weekend started off on Saturday with the first ever sprint race. I mean, Jack, what are your thoughts on the first ever sprint race? I thought it was fairly decent, but I mean, what do you think?
I mean, it's kind of easy to forget that we had this bizarre change in format, isn't it? But yeah, I don't think there's any issue with the sprint race itself. I'm just not quite so much a fan of how the whole weekend plays out. I think before there was a really, really good flow. I liked coming in on Thursday and having a look at press conferences, and then on Friday you'd be able to see the free practice highlights. And if you're working like I do, you watch the highlights, and then you get into it Saturday. It really builds up, but it felt like it was all too much at once for me. But I know that a lot of people feel that was good, and they want to watch something on Friday, and then something important on Saturday, and then something important on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of felt that. I sort of felt that it made Friday, especially like Friday afternoon, it made it a bit more interesting, made it a bit more like worthwhile. But I do think that Saturday probably benefited from a few things that took place. I guess obviously you're going to get things taking place during sprint race, but I think it benefited especially from, I mean, I'm going to shout out Fernando Alonso, obviously starting on the soft tyres in contrast to most of the grid, making his way up to, I think it was fifth in the first lap with some very, very good overtakes, especially Norris around the outside at Copse. And I do think that having Alonso up there in a car that wasn't as quick still allowed for racing. And I would question maybe whether it was as good, even if Alonso hadn't been there.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point as well. Yeah, the reduced sample size, if you like. But we've got a couple of other races to try out, so that's why we're doing it multiple races, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've confirmed it for Monza now, and then we've got another one later on in the season at a non-European race. So, I mean, I'd say it's always worth giving new things a try, and if they don't work, they don't work, and especially because there's still some incentive to trying them, because obviously there's the small amount of points for the top three, which I think they've probably done just because it is a bit of an experiment and they don't want it to affect the championship too much. But you always want to try new things. I think that's the thing we should take away from this.
Yeah, unless it looks bad, in which case you get rid of it as soon as possible. Think back to qualifying whenever it was, 2015.
Yeah, I mean that qualifying, no one really liked that. But I think we learned that the qualifying we've got does work, and if this can work as well, it could be a good way to change up the variety, and it does make a bit of a difference. And obviously, we saw especially with Sergio Perez, who qualified. He must have been fourth or third or something like that, but spun out halfway through the race and dropped down to the back of the grid. I mean, that was the sort of thing that most people were maybe not afraid of, but most people thought might happen. If you do make a mistake in the sprint race, then you are going to be starting at the back of the grid.
Yeah, and I think some people thought that was kind of the allure of the race as well, right? There's a bit more opportunity for things to be mixed up. But what I don't like is the fact that that opportunity is not the way round I would like it. So you generally got like people like Perez, the top people are more likely to be dropping down the bottom rather than some of the bottom players like your Schumachers and Russells that we normally like. We don't want them getting in the mix. That's what I'd rather see.
Yeah, I think possibly having it as just a normal like going qualifying into a sprint race is sort of, it doesn't really do, it's just I've seen a lot of people describe it as like a 17 lap race with a 24-hour red flag in the middle. And I do think, I mean, I had the thought that maybe Friday could just be a normal qualifying session and then we do get a sprint race, but with maybe a reverse top 10 in, or maybe put it a reverse top 10 in championship order, do something that maybe make the sprint race a bit more independent of the qualifying and race setup, but still allowing for some different strategies, different ideas, different people to potentially get onto a podium.
Yeah, and then if you do that too much, you're hitting the people who want there to be one race per weekend. Almost any other, I'd say any other racing formula that doesn't make a difference. Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula E, DTM, they're all multiple race weekends, but you turn up for one race and that's all it means. And that's kind of something that Formula 1 has always had. And some people don't like that we're putting a race in. I think that's why the FIA called it a sprint. And you heard a lot about the commentators, they're saying they can't call it a race. But yeah, I think that's why anyway.
I think just that, I mean, that's what they've got to work out. They've got to work out what is best, and the commentators definitely have to work out what they're going to call it for the next one. I mean, my thoughts were, why not call the first one the Friday session sprint qualifying, then call it the sprint race and then the actual race. So just saying it's qualifying for the sprint race. So go sprint qualifying, sprint race, then the actual race, which seems to make the most sense. But obviously, it's not up to me, is it?
No. But if F1 was up to us, then I think there'd be a far more chaos than there is. Probably a good thing what it's not.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're the most responsible, but coming on to the race, a race that blew apart in lap one, and with the collision of the two championship leaders, Hamilton and Verstappen, coming into Copse Corner after a first half a lap that was quite aggressive between the two. Hamilton going up the inside at turn one, Verstappen holding the position, like being paper thin apart and on the Wellington straight, and going into Brooklands, Verstappen chopping across Hamilton in quite a way, and then going into Copse Corner, Verstappen coming across Hamilton, not even diving up the inside, getting up the inside into Copse Corner, but on heavy fuel, cold tyres, understeering into Verstappen, putting him out of the race in quite a way. I mean, what was your reaction when you saw that incident?
Well, I missed the start. I was about 2 minutes behind, so
Oh no.
um, yeah, I came back from the loo and I was like, what on earth is going on here? I can't give you my live reaction, but my immediate thought was 25 points for Hamilton, win for a much better championship battle at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think my first reaction was I was just shocked. I didn't I can't remember the last time we had a big so we've had 2016 Spain when the two Mercedes collided, 2017 Baku when there was a bit of angst between Vettel and Hamilton, but I can't remember the last time there was a really big collision between two title rivals not from the same team, where you can't have it sorted out internally, where it has to be played out externally.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about those kind of collisions, I mean, if you think way back, you think like Villeneuve versus Schumacher or Hill versus Schumacher, that kind of collision. Generally, it's it's either two people taking each other out. Again, think Verstappen and Ricardo at Baku, or one person takes advantage. I think what's really crucial about this one is that Hamilton was at fault, but he wasn't the one taken out. That's what makes it so different.
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone's been talking about it for the last 2 weeks, and I think first off, so I would say Hamilton is not. I noticed how the stewards said predominantly to blame, but I mean, would you give it as a racing incident, or would you say a penalty for Hamilton was fair?
I mean, it's so difficult to say. If you look at the regulations, there's a slight grey area. I think the point at which they look at it is the point at which you start to turn in. But that corner, it's not quite, it's difficult to identify where the turning point is. I mean, frankly, any corner, but especially there when you're pretty much flat out. There is no braking. It's just off you go. So yeah, I think Hamilton could have pulled out, and then you'd have avoided a collision. But I think we saw it later. He pulled the same overtake twice, didn't he? And he wasn't given a penalty. I think a little bit of duty of care goes to the person on the outside there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was very borderline between racing incident and penalty. Personally, I do think that even if it was a bit more of a racing incident, he still would have been penalised just because of the ramifications of what happened. You're essentially not taking out your title rival, but your title rival has gone out because of like something that Hamilton had done. So he almost, maybe there was the perception that he needed to be penalised, and that if he could come back through the field, which as he did, as end up doing, getting Leclerc in the final few laps, that then it would sort of be case closed. I don't think the FIA really could have done anything more. And to be honest, it's probably worked out the best for them in terms of controversy. They can say that they've given Hamilton a penalty, but because of how dominant the Mercedes and the Red Bull are over the rest of the field, that he can still come back through the field. So they're sort of in the clear.
Yeah, I think the stewards have to be really careful because the rules say nothing about the consequences of your actions beyond if you do it intentionally. So if I don't know, Schumacher and Mazepin had pulled the same move, could you say that they would get 10-second penalties, or you get that? So I don't think you can look at the consequences of the actions, or I don't think they should. At least I know a lot of Red Bull fans have gone, "Oh, but you've wiped him out of the race and you've cost 1.2 million pounds of damage or whatever." But it doesn't actually have an effect on the penalty, or it shouldn't. In my opinion.
I mean, I think the best incident that you would look back to is probably last year in the same track at the final corner in Silverstone between Albon and Magnussen. Albon tries to get the inside, but catches Magnussen, spins him off into the gravel. Sort of the same sort of incident, but obviously one's a much more high-speed corner. So Verstappen hit the barrier, I think it was 160, 180 miles an hour, whereas Magnussen was going nowhere near as quickly when he collided with the barrier. And Albon got a 5-second penalty, Hamilton got a 10-second penalty. So I think a 10-second penalty was probably fair. I think the problem the FIA had, that they were, because how dominant the Mercedes is, they were always going to give a too harsh penalty. You're thinking your drive-throughs, your stop-goes, that have to be taken in 3 laps, which guaranteed drops him to the back of the field, 20 plus seconds behind everyone. And then his race is over. Even the Mercedes can't come back from that. Or you've got your 5-10 second time penalties that the Mercedes can easily recover to at least a podium. And as we saw, that get the win, it sort of wasn't really a middle ground that would have satisfied everyone. So I think they just had to make a decision.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Not much more I can add.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that it will change the obvious? How much do you? Yeah, I would say it will definitely change the dynamic of the season now. But how much do you think it will change the dynamic?
I think so many people have said, "Oh, it's going to happen at some point." I think maybe there's some aspect of it's out of the way now. Now we're on. Now it's a proper championship battle. There's a little bit of bitterness in between. I don't think it's going to change it too much, to be honest. I think we've already seen them race each other really hard before. I think Imola. I think they'll continue to do it. I think there'll be absolutely no qualms about that at all. Yeah, I don't think it'll be personal. The media like to play it up a bit, but everyone wants to win, regardless of whether it's someone they like or someone they like. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, the dynamic had already changed when Hamilton didn't back out as much as he would have normally done into that corner. Be it because maybe it's his home race, he wants to win. It's because he's, I think, well, at that point, he was like almost like 20, 30 something points behind Verstappen. He can't afford to lose anymore. And he left his nose in just enough that it would have an impact rather than pulling out, as we saw in like Imola in Spain, especially where Verstappen passed the inside, Hamilton has to take avoiding action to avoid a collision, and that maybe it just depends, I think, on whether Verstappen changes his behaviour in relation to that. And to be honest, I don't think he will.
I think I'm not so sure that their attitudes change. I think it's maybe there's a little bit of he's 32 points behind in the championship and he needs something big here. But I think it's just that before we've seen Verstappen the one on the inside, Verstappen the one who has the opportunity to be aggressive, and now Hamilton's like, you can't race me like this and not expect that back. That's what I think that was. I don't think it was him being, home race. Let's take him out. I'll get the win.
I think it really just depends on I think it depends on Verstappen now. He's definitely become a more mature driver since, like, we remember back to 2018 when he was having all the collisions at the start of the season. 2019, he was definitely better. 2020 is a bit harder to say because he was in his own race for the majority of the season, too far behind the Mercedes, but too far ahead of the rest of the pack. So it really depends on whether Verstappen has. I think it depends on whether Verstappen has matured into 2021, whether he will. Now Hamilton has said or indicated that he's not going to be backing out. Whether he will start to recognise the long game as opposed to the short game. Maybe if Hamilton's coming down the inside in Hungary and Verstappen has the option to turn in on him, maybe he won't. Maybe he'll look to play the long game, catch him at the end of the race, rather than like potentially risking them being both taken out at the beginning.
I don't think so. I'd love to say that he would, but he's not renowned for that, is he? I think you're right though that since his debut, with Ricciardo leaving the team, he's had less competition. He's had less people to race, less people to collide into. But now he's got a real title fight on his hand. Now everything matters, and he will damn well give it his all into everything, every corner, every start, every finish. I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one has the potential to go down as one of the, like, you're thinking year 89, year 76, 21, like 2021 could be one of those seasons. And because you're looking at essentially it's like always the young upstart versus the old pretender. You've got your essentially, it's like your Lauda in Hamilton, like calculating, he looks to the long game, and then you've got your Hunt in Verstappen, like the brash youngster who's always looking to get that win regardless of the long-term consequences. And I mean, it has the potential to be like one of the greatest championship battles we've seen probably since 2012.
And maybe like Lauda and Hunt, the rivalry between the two will be played up a little bit.
Yeah.
If you've seen Rush, it wasn't quite like that. They were friends outside the track, but let's hope for some interesting battles, I think.
But I mean, I think now we've probably come to maybe the post-race controversy. Or I guess controversy. Obviously, Christian Horner completely like he's beside himself with rage all the time. I'm pretty sure he hates Toto Wolff with a burning passion. Even Verstappen putting on his Instagram that he thought Hamilton celebrating at the end, celebrating on the podium, was disrespectful, and Helmut Marko calling for a one race ban. I guess I'd ask you, why? I guess first off, why do you think they're doing this, and do you think it's the best thing they should be doing?
All right, well, straight off the bat, they're not doing it because they think that they're going to get some one race ban or an increased penalty. If you look in the regulations, I sound like a complete nerd here. They have to bring new information which the stewards haven't seen, and obviously they can't do that. So, I mean, number one, there shouldn't be a hearing at all. I think that's either taken place already or is going to shortly. But that should be off the cards. Obviously, it is marketing, and it's about them feeling they've been hard done by, and it's about team morale and everything else. And I think F1 like to play into that. And recently they've seen social media. They'd like to divide by teams because it's a bit more American now. Whereas before you'd have like a pretty, fairly what's the word? I've forgotten the word. But no team affiliation. Now it's like we get these two fan bases and we just smack them together repeatedly. I think it's some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think possibly bringing the entire entire Red Bull family has sort of come into this, and I do think that it's like you wouldn't say that. Maybe we remember back to a louder hunt. It wasn't really about McLaren versus Ferrari, but I do think this time it could become Mercedes versus Red Bull, especially with how team orientated the sport has been for the last few years. You've got two definite rear gunners in both of the teams, in Perez and Bottas, and at this point, because both teams know how much of a battle it is, and maybe Mercedes feel that Red Bull disrespected them by claiming that their celebrations were disrespectful, that Mercedes might put more into developing this season just to beat Red Bull. And I do think that it will become you'll have the Verstappen Hamilton rivalry on the track, but you'll also have the Mercedes Red Bull rivalry, but just because of how much has been said after the fact, after the incident occurred.
Yeah, I think it's also because we're in probably the most dominant era of Formula One ever. I know we've had 5 years for Ferrari, and we've had that more and more, but it's very much the empire that Mercedes and Hamilton have built versus the underdog story. Maybe something that we haven't had before. Or at least not to that degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it will really be shown up at Hungary how much people have maybe calmed down, how much they've been riled up, especially by what's been said over the last week, 2 weeks. And I do think, I mean, would you agree that the Hungarian Grand Prix will be where it's sort of make or break between the two teams, whether it will cool down or whether it will boil over?
Yeah, so it's the last race before the 3-week summer break, so it does kind of set the tone for what it's going to be like. If we saw it at the start of the triple header and then 2 races in a row where they had respect for each other, sure, nothing happens. But if they go in here and they collide again, or there's more controversy, then yeah, that really does set. That's 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season that this has dominated headlines at that point, if that is the case. Yeah, and you then start to see that the rivalry is a real thing, not just a little bit of media stirring.
Yeah, and I mean, we know Mercedes have said that then they weren't going to upgrade the car, but then did bring upgrades to Silverstone. Do you think that possibly that they will continue to upgrade the car? Maybe sacrifice. Maybe they're getting drawn into a battle. Maybe they are sacrificing 2022 performance for 2021 gains, just because at the moment it does seem to be very, very close to becoming quite a bitter rivalry between the two for the 2021, both the drivers and the constructors titles.
Yeah, I mean, well, wouldn't you, if you're Toto or whoever's in charge? okay, they've won 7, 8 already, however many, 7 in it. But it's another world championship. If you're any other team in that situation, you think Ferrari would just stop developing because 2022's here? No. If you're in a championship battle, you go to the end or go till it's secure, because you don't want to go into 2022 and you don't throw away a championship for the next one. That's not how it works. You just can't.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hungary, this race this weekend will be one you won't want to miss, just because it will show how the championship is going to go for the rest of the season. But we did mention, obviously, Hamilton won the British Grand Prix, but it was only just coming three laps from the end where he I guess, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, unfortunately because I'm a Hamilton fan, but if you want to see a midfield car win, then you're a bit disappointed to see Hamilton overtake Charles Leclerc right at the end. I mean, I'd say it was probably the best performance from a midfield driver this season. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think we're losing definitions of what's a midfield car and what's not. But that Ferrari's definitely shown it's got pace before. But yeah, it's done well. I think Vettel's second place, that would probably top it for me, because that Aston Martin's is truly midfield car, isn't it? It's about fifth or sixth fastest, depending on how you think. Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years have been absolutely crazy for the gap close. In 2015-16, you would never imagine that Gasly and an AlphaTauri would go and win a race, or the number of podiums that we've had. So yeah, it's another excellent drive from years of excellent drives that we've seen. But yeah, absolutely well done to Leclerc. Yeah, I think you can't say he couldn't have won that race, but it would have been very, very difficult, even with the advantage he had.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you sort of split it into two eras of the hybrid so far. We've had the 14 to 16 Mercedes being absolutely dominant, like no team can get there near them. You got your 17 to 19, where you're thinking your big three teams, as far and away, they were always going to get on the podium. I think from 2017 to 2019, we only had like two midfield podiums or something like that. And then you've got your 2020 and your 2021, where admittedly there are still two teams that are quite far ahead of the rest of the pack. But if they do make mistakes, which they have been doing, we've had Verstappen spinning into the wall in Baku, Bottas's failed pit stop in Monaco, then these midfield teams can get onto the podium. And I think it is good, especially because they have got such talented drivers in your Charles Leclerc's, your Lando Norris's, your Carlos Sainz, your Daniel Ricciardo's, and even your Pierre Gasly's, Lance Stroll's, and Sebastian Vettel's in possibly the more midfield, that there has been a gap close, and it has allowed for more interesting races.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one as well. The quality of driver is no longer concentrated in the top layer. You don't have Verstappen, Ricciardo, Vettel, Leclerc, and Hamilton, Rosberg all in a big group of six right there. Now you've got some of the better young guns coming up, all spread throughout the field, and it's going to be great to see next year as well. Yeah, I think that's made a huge difference. I think obviously coming to the end of an era, more development means the gaps close up, as always, and then we change it, and then we're back to dominance, maybe. Let's hope not, but
yeah, I know. I mean, I know what you mean. I'd argue, so you've got probably I'd say the three best young drivers at the moment are Russell, or maybe the four, the Russell, Verstappen, Leclerc, and Norris. They're the four for the future, I would say. And only one of them is in a top team at the moment. Then you've got two that are in the sort of upper midfield that they can get on the podium, and perhaps even at some point in the season, especially if Verstappen and Hamilton do get embroiled in more like rivalries, that they might be able to scrape a few wins here and there. And then you've got George Russell, who's outperforming that Williams like by orders of magnitude, and probably will end up in a Mercedes seat by 2023 at the very latest. And I think they do have the option of showing their performance at the moment. You're not fighting for a 7th place if nothing goes wrong. Like Leclerc managed to finish second. Norris has been up there was fighting with the Mercedes in Austria. That because the gaps are closed, it's allowing the drivers in the midfield cars to show that they are as talented and maybe perhaps more talented than some of the drivers in the top cars.
Yeah, and it's also just the way the team shuffles worked. You know, I mean, Perez is a very good driver. Bottas is a very good driver, but they're not like. I was going to say they're not elite, but of course they are. It's Formula One, but there's just a tiny bit missing that means they can't be up there. And now you could question whether maybe Russell could be, maybe Norris could be in the right cup. We've got so much talent throughout the field. I mean, we haven't mentioned Vettel and Alonso in midfield teams. These are drivers with so many world championships. You know, the talent is absolutely stacked. So it's also no longer the big teams can just walk up to the best drivers and go, here's a contract. Because the gap closes, the drivers are willing to go elsewhere, which means the gap closes more. It's great.
Yeah, and even like you mentioned Alonso and Vettel, they're still performing. Like Vettel got a podium in Baku. Alonso has made some very good starts, like getting up to 5th in the sprint race, making a very good start in Baku to I think it was get to 4th or 5th from 9th by the end of that 2-lap sprint. There doesn't, possibly with the exception of a few drivers, I'm not going to name names just to not upset anyone, there doesn't seem to be any driver in more of the maybe midfield, excluding maybe like Haas and Williams. There doesn't seem to be any driver at the moment in the rest of those teams that is really undeserving of their spot at the moment.
I would upset a lot of people by saying Kimi, but
yeah, but I think possibly, but even like maybe you're thinking Alfa Romeo, your Kimi, Giovinazzi is always just there. But other than that, possibly,
yeah,
it's hard to say who
doesn't. I'm racking my brains
deserve their spot at the moment.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting for the F2 lot trying to get seats in here. I mean, we do still have 2 pay drivers. There's no doubt about that. I think Alfa Romeo is a really interesting. Talking about like seats next year, that's one that's really up in the air. But other than that, it's very clear that drivers are performing. They're being given a target or a limit or whatever, and they're getting to it. I might maybe Tsunoda. He hasn't had time to settle in.
I think Tsunoda was my thought, but again, as you say, he hasn't had time to settle in. I think the driver market this season does sort of depend on what Mercedes do. If, like, let's say they do hire up Russell for 2022, who goes to Williams? Is it Bottas? Is it De Vries? Is it Kvyat? Even Hulkenberg might come back into F1. But you've got I think Williams, Mercedes, and possibly Red Bull, who might be waiting to see what Mercedes do, especially if you have got a Hamilton, Russell, 2 drivers that are supremely quick and probably will overcome, like you're thinking, your one quick driver and then one probably less consistent driver. But we got to wait and see. It really depends, I think, on what Mercedes do. That is when the driver market will burst into life.
Yeah, and I think we were expecting a fairly quiet driver market generally because again, it's the switch to 2022 cars. You know, there's no point signing for a team that immediately becomes 7th or 8th place. You've got to see where the title fight might be, and then try and get yourself in one of those teams, rather than just go straight into a random team.
I mean, yeah. I mean, let's go. If we go back to the race quickly, obviously we've mentioned Leclerc, like supreme drive, like could probably not have done better with what he was given. But I mean, the McLaren boys also did really well. Norris in 4th, and especially Ricciardo in 5th. Like I think probably the first race that he's starting to actually show that he was probably just getting used to the McLaren, and now he is picking up the pace and performing on its probably true level.
Yeah, he's getting there slowly. I think there's been a lot of hype around Ricciardo because he was a really good number 2 for Red Bull. But it's difficult to say that he's really performed outside of that team, like not to the level that everyone thought that he might when he got that seat, Red Bull initially. Hopefully, I want to see him do well. Obviously, I do. But also, slight McLaren fanboy might say I don't want him to beat Norris too much. So this is the kind of the perfect result for me.
Yeah, I mean, for Norris up to we'll mention Norris. We always mention Norris because he just is performing this season. One race outside the top 5, only driver to have scored points in all the races and back up to 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, you don't want to say that he probably could remain in 3rd, depending on how consistent Perez and Bottas become. I think that would be like the pipe dream. But if he does keep performing, like there's nothing. He's sort of doing the best he can, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think that 3rd is pretty optimistic when you look at the results that Perez and Bottas have. They're pretty inconsistent. And it's difficult to say that he's going to finish in the points every single race of the season. So I don't think he's going to quite manage it. But if he did, that'd be great. But he's had 3 podiums so far. Well, the thing about F1 scoring is it's so dependent on good finishes that kind of those, you need 2 4th place finishes to make up for a win in a DNF or something like that, isn't it? I can't even do the maths on it, but it might even be 3rd.
About that.
Yeah, if you're finishing off the podium, then you need to do what Norris is doing, and you need to be the top of the, the best of the rest every week in, week out, and he's doing that. So, well played to him.
Yeah, and I mean, his qualifying performances have been like amazing. Obviously, qualifying 2nd in Austria, and we sort of seemed to have worked out what tracks like Ferrari and McLaren are sort of good at. You're looking at McLaren for your like power circuits, your Monzas, and your maybe possibly your Jeddas at the end of the season, like the quick circuits. Whereas with Ferrari, you're looking at your more twisty ones. So I think like Ferrari in Hungary could be up there because we've had Leclerc on pole twice this season, once in Monaco and once in Baku. Maybe Baku isn't a track that would have suited them that much, but he probably got a double toe, so they benefited from that. So I do think that the battle between Ferrari and McLaren will be a good one this season, especially if Norris remains consistent and both maybe Sainz and Ricciardo improve up into possibly challenging their teammates into the latter half of the season.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a reflection of the top 2 battle, doesn't it? Yeah, and probably a reflection of the next 3 as well. AlphaTauri and Alpine and Aston Martin, all the A's. Maybe even Alfa Romeo getting in there. It's great to see these really close battles throughout the whole championship. Something we've really not seen, at least not all the way down the leaderboard.
Yeah. I think that's another thing about this season is there are 4. Well, I've just put up the Constructors' Championship quickly. Red Bull 289, Mercedes 285, McLaren 163, Ferrari 148, AlphaTauri 49, Aston Martin 48, Alpine 40, and then Alfa Romeo on 2, and Haas and Williams are still yet to score. But there are 4 very well-defined battles, and it makes the championship interesting up and down the grid because obviously you've got the battle for 1st between Red Bull and Mercedes, the battle for 3rd between McLaren and Ferrari, the battle for 5th between AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, and Alpine, and then potentially the battle for the 8th between Alfa Romeo, Williams, and maybe even Haas if they somehow work miracles on that car.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the 8th, 9th, 10th battle's not really much of one, but it's going to be one of them gets lucky one time and then they can score a few more points. it's yeah. I mean, if we're talking about the back of the field, I feel like I steal your hosting job from you.
That's
I want
fine.
to talk about Schumacher and Mazepin, because that's an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've had for the majority of the start of the season, Schumacher's been ahead of Mazepin. I think I'm trying to think. I think it might be how many rounds have we had? How many races?
Oh God, 9 or 10?
Nine. I think. Well, it's.
9.
I think Mazepin has beaten Schumacher twice now. So we saw him beat him in Monaco. I think Schumacher had engine issues, but this time it seemed that Mazepin did beat Schumacher on merit. So I mean, it's fair enough. You can't really say much about Haas just because they are so far behind everyone else. I know Williams are on the same amount of points as them and are behind them in the Constructors' Championship, but you would imagine at some point George Russell, he's getting into Q3, like he's getting into Q3 now. He will probably at some point, unless he keeps being George Russell and getting monumentally unlucky, he will get a 10th or a ninth or an 8th at some point, especially if you get a race of carnage that we might get later on in the season.
Yeah, I mean, go if you of course you want Russell to score points, you want Williams to score points. Come on, when is it going to happen? I think Williams obviously questionable. They should score points at some point. Haas on the other hand, not questionable. They're not going to score points. Those two have been dead last at the bottom. But even for dead last, there's been competition there. There's been you can see they're both struggling. I feel like it should be said. Mazepin's an asshole and everyone hates him, but he is starting to. He's might do a Stroll. He might do the yes, I'm a paid driver, but that doesn't mean I can't learn quickly. He might do that, and he's starting to show even this early in the season that that's certainly a possibility.
Oh, I think you've done Stroll a bit hard done by there, comparing him to Mazepin.
No,
I will always back. I think Stroll. I think I see. Okay, I see your point that initially paid driver, but I do think Stroll started to perform quite quickly. You're looking at he in 2017 getting a podium with a Williams that was a midfield car in Baku. In 2018, or it might have been 2018, maybe it was 2017 as well. Getting on, I think it was qualifying third place in the wet at Monza, and then I think Stroll has definitely improved, and his wet weather driving, I would argue, is probably, I would almost say third on the grid behind probably Hamilton and Verstappen. I think that Stroll is the third place. If you were going on ability in the wet, I think Stroll would be third place, and I think that maybe if we do get, like, I'm thinking like there's always rumors of rain for F1 races, but if you do get a wet race, then Stroll can climb the field, maybe even qualify on pole like he did in Turkey last season. And if we don't forget, he led half of the race before allegedly getting damaged. I don't think anyone really sort of knows what went on there, but I think I would say that Stroll is he's definitely worth his Aston Martin seat, regardless of whether Lawrence Stroll is bankrolling the team or not.
Yeah, I think I can't remember. It's been a while since Stroll walked into the F1 paddock, but I think it was very clear that he was there because of money, and I think at the time no one rated him. There wasn't F2 at the time, was there? But
No.
so it's hard to give the same comparison. But I honestly think when he came into F1, he wasn't good enough to be an F1 driver. I don't think people were wrong about that. I don't think it was just people saying he's a pay driver. But I think that he's shown that he's a very fast learner and he's very mature and he appreciates that he's there by fortune rather than quality, and he has to step up. I'd love to see Nikita Mazepin understand that and understand that he has to learn from everyone around him, because that's how you get better. And I think there's a little bit of a sign that might start to happen. Hopefully.
Yeah. And I think if we take all of his actions out of the equation for a second, which obviously you can't really, maybe you can't really do. But just if we just focus on his driving, his aim this season is to beat Schumacher, because obviously that's the only driver he can really compete against. Perhaps with Latifi as well, depending on how good that Williams is from race to race. But if he can improve, then it just makes it less of a 19 driver championship and more of a 20 driver championship. If Haas somehow do have a good car for 2022 because they haven't developed in 2021, then it gives another driver that could score points, and it just makes the overall health of the championship a bit better.
Yeah, it can't, for the Haas drivers at the moment, it can't be position based. It can't be beat your teammate. It can't be beat this person. It has to be get better. But get better doesn't have a numerical value on it, beyond maybe qualifying. They have to hope that they can get put in a car that's more competitive, and that when they do, whether that's next year, whether that's 3 years time, whether that's 10 years time when they get a new contract, or however it goes, when that happens, they're ready for it. So it's about that, not necessarily, you won 10-8 in the qualifying battle or whatever.
Yeah, and I'd say they're probably benefiting maybe slightly from being out of the spotlight, from being able to learn when there is no expectations. Maybe in contrast to perhaps Yuki Tsunoda, who has been, or not shoved into the limelight, but has been put in a team that can score points and even potentially score podiums, as we saw in Baku with Gasly, but has maybe perhaps suffered from that with a few run of poor qualifying performances where he crashed. And maybe Schumacher and Mazepin are benefiting from the fact that they don't have any expectations on their shoulders, and their one job is just to learn how to drive quickly.
Yeah, it depends on the person, doesn't it? Some people thrive under pressure. I mean, you shoved Michael Schumacher into a team, and he was good enough to just go, straight into things. Yeah, you can't say until if or when they get the chance, and then we'll see what's happened this year. Then we'll see how the improvement has been. But at the moment, yeah, you're right. It's all behind the scenes. It's all at least a little bit of pressure off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be it for the recap. It was definitely, I'd probably give that race maybe I wouldn't. The middle was sort of a bit dull, but obviously you've got the drama of the first lap, the drama of the last few laps. I think I'd go maybe 7.5, 8 out of 10 for a race. I mean, what would you give it out of 10?
It's so difficult to say, isn't it? I'm going to say 9 out of 10 because I love sitting back and watching the Mercedes and the Red Bull fans just squabble among themselves. So I couldn't ask for more. I love watching McLaren and Leclerc get up there. So
yeah. If you want to watch some toxicity, go on F1 Twitter right now, or not even right now. Go on F1 Twitter
anytime.
If the two drivers collide after this weekend, then you will see some drama. But I mean, coming to this weekend's race, because I wouldn't say there's been any news in F1 this week. We've all focused on the Verstappen Hamilton potential implosion at the Hungarian Grand Prix and the Hungarian Grand Prix preview. I mean, Hungary, it's a track last season started wet, finished dry, fairly standard race. I don't think it was that interesting. 2019, we obviously had the famous Hamilton pits for a second time, comes back with a few laps to go. And I mean, what would you say about Hungary as a racetrack or as a race in general?
I mean, last year we saw Verstappen throw it in the wall in the formation. It wasn't even the formation lap; it was going to the grid, wasn't it? That made the race exciting. The track itself wasn't necessarily the cause of that, but I think it is still a decent track. It's a shame it's not on the calendar anymore, but we do have a lot of races in Europe.
I thought
it's got the.
I think it is still on the. I don't think it's one of. I think it is. It's fairly permanent fixture on the calendar, isn't it?
Is it? Okay. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm mixing it up with Portugal or something.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of killed my point, hasn't it?
Oh no,
I think it's a good track. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, it is a good track, and we've seen a lot of what F1's been putting out on social media. Like, some of the races I think have been a bit overlooked. You've got you had your 2014 win, the wet, where Ricardo took, I think it was his second win. Your 2015 with the drama right at the end, where like Rosberg and Hamilton and Ricardo all sort of came together. Where Vettel won, I think his second race for Ferrari. I think it's definitely got the potential for a good race, and especially with the rivalry between Hamilton and Verstappen potentially coming to a head. And perhaps we always say it, but there is some tentative forecast of rain that won't come, but might come, but won't, but might, but won't. So, I mean, there's not much you can really say. So I guess we will actually, what we'll do is we've started this new thing where we all make predictions and predictions of the top three. So we'll go for last week's one. So I went for Hamilton, Verstappen, Norris. So I got the winner right, and none of the other ones because like Verstappen's out, Norris fourth, not bad. Then I said there would be a tyre blowout. Didn't happen. All the Brits in the points. George Russell let me down again. And teammate collision, which I will give myself half a point because the Haas collided in the sprint race. And then my guest last week, Cam Hall, said Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas. So he did actually beat me on that one because Hamilton won, Bottas came third. So it's more accurate. But then he said Russell out in Q1, which wasn't entirely accurate. Russell got into Q3. Aston Martin, good weekend, double points. Sebastian Vettel's spin let him down there, and Ricardo ahead of both Ferraris. Well, he was ahead of one, but unfortunately Leclerc performed too well. So I think I'd say that was a draw, possibly Cam taking it with the top three prediction, but we'll do the same thing this time. So, I mean, Jack, do you want to give me your top three and then three predictions for the weekend as a whole?
Oh, goodness. I am totally unprepared for this. Right. Let's go Verstappen number one.
All right.
And then I will go with Hamilton 2 and Perez 3.
Okay. So Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez. I'll let you think of your three just predictions throughout the weekend, and I will go for I'm just going to go for my heart, so I will say Hamilton win, but this will come into my predictions, so it'll come in later on. I don't think Verstappen will get a podium, so I'm going to go Hamilton, Sainz, and Leclerc. The bold one, but it could pay off.
Okay, all right.
All right. What are your top three or just predictions in general?
Okay. Oh God. Russell scores points. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen at some point.
Every time we do that, it doesn't. But this time,
yeah, no, but it doesn't matter if you do it or not. It doesn't.
Russell scores points.
Hamilton crashes out in qualifying and causes a red flag.
Okay. Ham crash in quali, and then the final one.
God, I'm just making stuff up for this. Okay, can you do your three? No.
I'll do my six. Right. So I think I'm gonna go Norris outscores Verstappen or Hamilton. So yeah, I'm gonna go Norris outscores Verstappen or Hamilton in the race. Oh, this is actually a difficult one. I think I can't really go Ferrari best of the rest because that's sort of just playing into my podium prediction. I might go Ferrari pole. I'm gonna go Ferrari pole. And then the final one, I think that I might jinx it, but I'll go mid-race thunderstorm. There have been. I have just jinxed it, and there will now be no rain whatsoever. But if there is, then I can't remember the last time we had a mid-race like rain where it started dry, went and then went wet. Oh, when did
Don't
that
ask
happen?
me.
No, I'll go mid-race rain, which could have the potential to spice things up. So, do you want to do your final one?
Sure. I've got Russell scores points and Hamilton crashes in qualifying. Can I just do something boring like I don't know, Bottas? Bottas gets the fastest lap. There you go.
Bottas fastest lap. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, it's potential. I think my podium's a bit ambitious, but I think you're gonna see like, if you are gonna see a collision between the two out of Hamilton and Verstappen, it's gonna be not a minor one, but a minor one that has major consequences. You're gonna see, especially with how that first sector in Hungary is. It's very well designed for pushing another driver off the track, and you could potentially see maybe a puncture at the start of lap one that could allow one driver to get ahead, one driver goes to the back, but then my mid-race rain brings it all back together and allows for Hamilton to still win.
I don't know. I don't think Verstappen and Hamilton could push each other off the track if Hamilton crashes in qualifying, can it?
Yeah, I mean, or maybe they even both crash in qualifying, but we've got to wait and see. And that is all. Bit of a shorter one because obviously no news, because no one seems to be able to report on anything if we're all focusing on Verstappen and Hamilton having a collision. But I mean, but I'll come to you, Jack, if you say it.
I was going to say we should end on a good note. I just want to talk about Seb going and picking up the litter at the end of that.
Oh,
there's been plenty of memes about that. That's been great.
We'll end on a Seb wholesome moment, but also remind you to check out the video where he can't use a party popper in the press conference that was today as we film, because obviously it's Alonso's 40th birthday. So yeah, just check out Seb doing a party popper into the floor. So we always love a good bit of Seb Vettel content. But yeah, thanks Jack for coming on being a guest.
You're absolutely welcome. I'll be glad to turn up anytime. That's the words.
Yeah, and that's probably it for this half of the season. We might do a mid-season review depending on how it is, but next time will probably be just before the Belgian Grand Prix after the summer break. And yeah, I guess that's everything. I've been Will Kingswood. This has been Real Sport Weekly, and thank you for listening.